So welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today I have a solo episode. And I want to talk about the pyramid that I think about for the importance of body composition with that lens of performance and health, with looking at it through the lens of performance and health as well too. So again, it's the pyramid that I use in the framework that I use to help clients lose fat, build muscle, and perform at their best. And so, okay, the reason I want to do this is what is the most important things and what are the big levers that we can focus on when, again, it's okay, hey, stuff's hitting the fan. What do we need to focus on and what are going to be your main drivers? So in that way, you don't focus on the things that don't matter as much and you do focus on the things that are super important there. So real quick though, before I dive into that, if you haven't yet, make sure you grab my free body recomp checklist. So I go over 10 things you need to see a body recomp. And then I also talk about the two types of body recomp, why it's important to focus on body composition, and maybe slightly different definition of what people have around body recomp. So make sure you go and check that out. The link to that is in the show notes and it's completely free there. So let's talk about today's topic. So I think this is important because, as I said, it can be super important to know, okay, if I make this change or somebody says this, is that going to be a thing that is actually important and something I need to work on or not? And what's crazy about these two is we can sit here and go through for each one. What is the most important lever to pull for each one? So what I want to do today, though, is I want to go over the kind of the general pyramid, what it looks like, starting from the base all the way up to the things that maybe are less important. But I do want to spend some time specifically on the nutrition piece of what I think is the order of importance when it comes to nutrition and my rationale for it. And obviously some limitations of thinking about it from that standpoint. So again, this is how I think about the key variables for changing your body composition inside the performance recomp method. So the base of the pyramid is going to hold the biggest drivers of progress, the things we need to get right first, because they have the greatest impact on body composition and performance, obviously with that lens of health as well too. From there, we can move upward, adding additional layers that still matter, but won't deliver the same results if the foundation isn't in place. But these higher tiers can influence how effective and efficient the base tiers are. So the whole system does work together. But again, what we need to look at is, okay, if we make this change, what is going to be the potential change what's going to be the potential factor of that change? So you can evaluate if that's the right move for you or not. For an example would be like somebody says, hey, it's super important to take, or okay, so let's go from like a calorie cycling standpoint. Someone says, hey, calorie cycling is great. Okay, that's good. And you can implement that. But if we implement that, what are the other things that we are doing? Because if we're not doing certain things, the calorie cycling will be less impactful. Same thing with body part specializations, the training splits that people do, right? These are things that are important, but if we're overly focused on those things, we lose sight of what is actually going to drive change. And then same thing for supplements, right? These can also be important, but they're not going to drive anything if the first tiers aren't in place. They can help. Like I would say, when I think about supplements, I have kind of my core supplements that I'm going to recommend to each person, right? Vitamin D, magnesium, fish oil, creatine. Like I'm going to recommend those. And somebody is likely, if their diet quality is terrible and they implement these things, like they're going to start to feel better. But if we're trying to change our body composition, it's just not going to have a huge impact on changing your body comp if the other things aren't checked. So at the bottom of the at the bottom of the pyramid, which these are the most important. Okay. So if I'm getting somebody new and they want to improve how they look, they want to perform better, and they want to improve their overall health, the very first thing before we look at anything else is we need to look at your movement and training. Okay. That's at the base of the pyramid. So to me, daily movement is number one. Yes, weight training is important, but if we're breaking it down to the absolute most important thing, we got to get movement. We need to make sure that we're getting the daily steps. It obviously is going to support appetite regulation. It can support a healthy body comp. It can help with stress management, and it can help improve better sleep. So it just is going to have, plus again, we were meant to move, right? Like we're not meant to just move 2,000 steps a day. Like we need to move throughout the day. So again, that kind of number that I'm aiming for is 8 to 10K steps, but this can range from person to person. Maybe somebody is a little bit lower than that. I think we should try and hit 8K as a minimum, but maybe people have a lifestyle that they move more. That's totally fine too. But I think that 8 to 10K is where we want to be. Anytime a client has a bad week or they can't make it to the gym, it's okay. That's fine. Like obviously that's not the most ideal thing, but we need to get movement in. That is going to drive so many things, regardless of what your nutrition looks like. So no matter what, if the first thing I want is let's get you moving, like if we're not moving at least 6, 7 steps K steps per day, it's like we got to get that up. Like everything that we do, it can help, but it's just not going to be as effective if we're not moving throughout the day. So if somebody's getting 2,000 steps a day, so yeah, we can obviously improve your food quality, but we're still going to be limited on what we can do if we're not moving throughout the day. And then obviously we have our lifting as well too. So again, this is going to be the most effective tool for building and maintaining lean body mass, which that has a ton of benefits from a body composition standpoint. You're not going to drastically change your body composition if you're not resistance training. We're looking at a minimum of 2 lifting sessions per week focused on 0 to 3 RIR and progressive overload. So we also want to have that aspect of it. Yes, just weight training in general is going to be fine. That's enough. But if we want to drive body comp change and true body comp change and noticeable change, we need to make sure that we're also doing those things, a progressive overload, training fairly close to failure, and at least getting 2 sessions in per week. Can you get by with 1 session per week where you're super far away from failure and you don't progressively overload? Yeah, I think you'll be fine, but you're not going to see that like true drastic physique change with that setup. But so we need to be lifting, right? Again, when I'm looking at a client, we could talk about all these cool strategies, but we need to make sure we're lifting because again, that's going to be the big thing that is going to drive body comp change. And then we need a good cardio base. So this is going to improve recovery capacity, stress resilience, work output, and overall health. We're looking at a minimum of 1 to 2 sessions per week that can get your heart rate up for about 20 to 30 minutes at a time. Maybe we do some intervals as well too. If I'm going to tier this bottom pyramid, to me, again, we got to start with daily movement and then lifting. Those are like hand in hand. We got to do those. And while everyone should be doing some form of cardiovascular training, if one has to take a hit for a period of time, that's going to be that will probably be the one because you're still getting movement in. If I had to pick now, in 99.999% of cases, like we need to be doing all 3. But if I had to get rid of one, it would likely be that because we're still moving, which is super important. Are you going to max out your cardiovascular fitness? No. Are there some potential issues of not improving your cardiovascular fitness? Yes. But I think if we can focus on these first 2, we're in a good spot there. So these 3 are non-negotiables if you want to improve your actual body composition, not just losing weight. You can lose weight without doing these things, but from an overall health perspective and just everything in general, like things are just not going to be as great if we don't exercise and move our body there. So then we have tier 1B, I guess you could call it tier 2, but to me, like nutrition, so it's going to be nutrition, and nutrition is super important. But the reason it comes under training or after training is for all the reasons I mentioned. We can't have body comp change through just nutrition. Again, we could have weight loss through just nutrition. We can have weight gain through just nutrition, but we're not going to see those from a body comp standpoint, what it's made up of in terms of muscle and body fat. It's likely not going to be as good it's not going to be as good if we don't lift weights, we don't move, right? We don't send that signal that we need more lean body mass. And you're just going to have a tougher time with your nutrition in terms of changing your body as well too, if we're not also exercising with it. As I said, nutrition is going to drive fat loss or muscle gain, but only when paired with proper training. So if we just focus on nutrition, we get that dialed in, whatever that looks like for the person, and we're not weight training, our amount of muscle we're going to be has really just going to be limited to what you could get from your everyday habits that you're doing, right? You're not going to, again, you can't drive muscle growth by eating more protein or eating enough calories. It's just not going to happen. You can't build muscle by just sleeping. Those things help you build muscle, but you have to send that stimulus to build muscle by weight training. So again, if we're in a deficit and we're not weight training or moving, and we lose weight, we have this risk of some of it being lean body mass potentially. So again, you can lose weight through diet alone, but you won't improve body composition without tier 1A in place, because that's what's going to send that stimulus to build muscle. And then everything else you do helps that process happen. So when we look at key priorities in order of importance when it comes to nutrition perspective, with this lens of changing your body composition, it can get challenging. So just understand that this is, as of right now, this is what I'm going with. And this could change, and I'll give you my rationale for why I had this order. So the things that I'm going to be looking at are going to be things like nutrition period, macros, like meal timing, food quality, calories, etc. These are all going to be things that I'll lump into this. So my key priorities in order of importance, the first one that I put here is protein. This was hard to choose, and it went it was either between this or calories, like your total caloric intake, because obviously we need to make sure that we're in the right energy balance to see the change that we want to see. And that's heavily influenced by the amount of calories that you're consuming. But I put protein first because, again, when we look at body composition, protein is just going to do a lot of extra things for us and help set us up to eat in the right amount and help with body composition as well too. So when we look at protein, again, you could be weight training, right? But if you're not eating enough protein, like you will build some muscle to an extent, but that process is going to be limited if you're not consuming enough protein. Now, we're talking super low amounts here. Say you're just getting like 20 grams a day, which is really hard for people to do. And there's levels to this. If you're eating, say, 80 grams of protein a day and you're 160 pounds, you're not going to not build any muscle. But if you're training perfectly and then you're eating 80 grams of protein a day, you're not going to grow as quickly as somebody who's eating, say, closer to 120 grams of protein at that level. But going from 20 to 80 is going to be a huge jump compared to going from 120 to 140. You're going to see bigger return on investment going from, say, 20 to 80 than you would from going 120 to 140. You still may get a bit more going from 120 to 140, but it's going to be a lot less for people there. And again, this is dependent on body weight. If you're 180 pounds, that's going to be different. If you're 100 pounds, then 80 grams of protein is going to be pretty solid for you there, around 1 gram per pound of body weight. But again, with protein, I put this here because, again, for what I just said there, it can largely impact training. We need protein. Like, we need protein for all our bodily functions, not just muscle. We need it for other things. So there's that. But then we have other things where protein, when you focus on eating enough protein, in most cases, it can help cut out other food in your diet. Essentially, your overall diet quality improves by eating enough protein. Plus, protein has it can increase your thermic effect of food, which is how many calories you burn absorbing and digesting food, so that you can get a small uptick of that, which gives us some flexibility from a body comp standpoint. And then it's also satiating. So again, you're less likely to overconsume food because you're eating protein. Now, it's going to depend on the type of protein you're eating. There might be a little bit of a habituation effect to this, where if you're always eating high protein, maybe your body's adapted to that and it doesn't have the same satiety impacts as it did when you went from 80 to 140. But just understand that protein typically helps improve the diet by just focusing on getting enough protein in there. And it's not an easy thing, but it's not necessarily like you need to go crazy with your diet style to get your protein in. So that's why I put it. And so it can impact how many calories you're consuming, right? So that's why I ended up putting it first. That's my rationale. Again, I would be curious to hear other people's thoughts on that, but that's why I ended up putting it ahead of calories, because calories come in at number 2 in terms of importance, because how much food we're eating is going to be super important. We could have the perfect meal timing. We could have the perfect macro setup. We could be having good diet quality, eating enough protein, but if we're over consuming calories or we're under consuming calories and our goal is not matched up to that, we are going to impact our results a bit. So what I mean by that is, if you are trying to build as much muscle as possible or you've always been eating low calorie, like, your ability to change, even though you're training super hard, it is going to be somewhat limited there, right? But then same thing, if you're trying to drop some body fat and you're over consuming calories, even though everything's perfect, that's going to hamper your ability to do that. So that's why it's placed a bit higher, and it's placed higher than some of these other things, because like I said, you could also be eating the perfect diet and be eating the perfect meal timing, but if we're over consuming calories, doesn't really matter. So that's why calories come second. So how much you eat is super important. It's more important than diet quality. Now, in saying that, that's next on my list is food quality. This is super high on the priority list. And people will talk past each other on this. Oh, it's definitely diet quality that's going to be the most important. Yes, if you have good diet quality, the likelihood of you over consuming calories is low. But when we come back, a lot of people that are into health and fitness, they focus on quote unquote fat loss foods, whole foods, very satiating type foods, and their diet quality is good, but now they're under eating calories, or they're eating the same types of foods over and over again, and that can potentially become problematic. So food quality is super important, because again, if we're just focused on calories and we're not focused on our diet quality, you could potentially impact your ability to lose body fat, build muscle from a micronutrient standpoint. And plus, multiple studies have shown that when people are the higher quality their diet is, the more weight loss they will have over say 12 weeks. So diet quality is super important. We don't want to neglect that, but it comes slightly lower than how much you eat. So to me, food quality is high on the priority list, and it sometimes can be neglected in people that are very just calorie and macro focused there. But you also see it the other way too, where people are only focused on eating whole foods, and now they can undereat calories, and or they have good diet quality, but it's like typically like more calorically dense quote unquote health foods, and that leads to more calories being eaten than they want there. And when we just look at ultra processed foods versus more less processed type foods, generally speaking, when it comes to like brain health, things like that too, there's less of a negative impact when you have a higher quality diet. There's less inflammation, and all these things have downstream effects on your total daily energy expenditure, how you feel, etc. So that's why food quality is there. And then from there, we have meal timing. This again is often overlooked. You'll hear a lot of people, proponents of if it fits your macros approach, or just calorie and macro tracking, be like, meal timing doesn't matter as long as your calories are in check. Yes, that is 100% true. But poor meal timing can make hitting your calorie target much tougher. When we look at our circadian rhythm, poor meal timing can impact that, which is going to have downstream effects. It can impact your training performance, which can impact how much muscle you can build. So meal timing to me is very important, and I think it's often overlooked. But it can't come ahead of calories because you could have good meal timing. But for example, let's take like time restricted feeding. That's a kind of sub variable of meal timing. You could be doing that, but if you're still over consuming calories and you want to be at a lower caloric intake, that's going to impact you, right? Same thing, you can have perfect meal timing, but if you're trying to eat more calories to build muscle, but you're not eating enough, meal timing's not going to be super helpful there. But in saying that, I do think we can utilize meal timing better is important for a lot of people. Some good meal timing practices: get some food in around your workouts, at least the post workout within an hour or two afterwards. Limit heavy meals too close to bed, and then try and stick with relatively consistent meal timing in terms of like how many meals you have, and then again relatively consistent with when you're having those meals as well too. And then we have the rest of our macros, so fats and carbs. So when new clients come to me, they're typically like, why are we not tracking? Where should my carbs and fats be? I'm like, if we have calories in check, we have protein in check, we're working on your meal timing, we're improving your diet quality, I really don't care where your carbs and fats are. Now, yes, there's going to be some situations where maybe somebody's eating way too high carb and they need to be lower, and we need to work on that. And then maybe some people are too low carb and we need them to be higher, no doubt. But I just find that those are lower on the priority list. And if somebody asks how many carbs I should be eating, we're overlooking other important factors there. If your training's not going well, you're not recovering well either, then maybe you do need to increase your carbohydrate intake a little bit. Maybe we're in a phase where we're not fat loss dieting. Now we can increase our carbohydrate intake a little bit as well too. And then lastly, we have nutrition periodization. So this is, hey, am I in a fat loss phase? Am I in a building phase? Again, these are important, but they can't come before like these other habits in terms of nutrition. This is where it's, oh, hey, I'm trying to lose body fat. What should my calories be? And it's, we need to get these things in check before you stress about what phase you're in, because if we get these things dialed in first, these phases become much more effective and efficient than worrying about if you're in a building phase or a fat loss phase there. So that's nutrition. And then that's the order of importance for nutrition. So again, it is important, but it's not the thing that is, if you're not training enough or you're not training hard enough or your training's not good, it's like the nutrition's only going to help you to a certain extent. So then we have the next tier, which is going to be recovery and just like lifestyle type stuff, right? This is going to be things like your sleep and circadian health, your stress load management, and your mindset. These don't directly cause fat loss or muscle gain. Like we need definitely the first tier for sure. And even with nutrition too, it's like sleep isn't directly going to impact body composition, but it's more indirectly where it promotes a environment where you're more likely to consume more calories and to have a lower energy expenditure, which leads to poor body composition over time. And then also, again, just makes your body less efficient to want to have body comp change if these aren't in check. More so the sleep and circadian health and the stress load management, the mindset. Again, it can fall into this because again, if our mindset is not good, we have poor mindset, we have all or nothing thinking, it's like that is going to impact your first two things that you do there. So again, how I like to think of these is they make the first two tiers more effective and efficient. So these are going to determine how likely your body is to adapt. We could be training perfectly, maybe our nutrition's good, but if our stress load is super high on our body, we're going to have more friction in the process of changing our body. If our sleep and circadian health are off, there's just going to be more friction in this process. Because like I said, if your circadian health is off, you may find that you're fatigued throughout the day, so you're less likely to want to train, you're less likely to push your training, so it's going to be harder to provide that stimulus that you need to continue to change your body. From a nutrition perspective, if our circadian health is off or sleep is off, now we're more likely to not want to stick to what we're doing, we're more likely to want to eat tastier foods. It just makes the food that we give our body less efficient and effective is the best way I can describe it. These are going to determine how likely your body is to adapt. Like you can totally, if you're doing the first thing here where you're moving, training hard, getting some cardio in, your nutrition, you're focused on some of these things, but your sleep and circadian health are off, you may see some change, but you're going to be fighting an uphill battle. And then for some people, it is really going to slow things down. So that's why this is placed here, because it's super important. And most programs and coaching programs overlook these things, but we can't have perfect circadian health and not focus on our nutrition and not do any sort of training or movement and expect our body composition to change. Again, you'll feel better, but when we look at body composition change, like we need that first tier. And then same thing with stress load management. We could have no stress, like the stress load on our body could be super low, but if we're not doing the first couple things, it doesn't matter. We need to have those things. So that's why this falls here. And then lastly, we have at the top of the pyramid, we have fine tuning. So this is like hydration. Again, hydration is important, but you can't hydrate your way to improve body comp. This is going to impact how you feel. This could help you maybe potentially eat less, but you're not, again, going to hydrate your way to fat loss or body comp change. Now, I think hydration is super important. If you are chronically underhydrated or dehydrated and you go and try and train, like your training performance is going to be impacted. So it is important, but it falls lower on, okay, we need to move first and we need to provide that stimulus. Supplements, again, these can also be important, but it's not going to drive anything if the first tiers are not in check. Like I said, I have my foundational supplements so that if we start taking these things, you're going to feel better, and now you're going to be more likely to do the things that on the front end. But you can't supplement your way to body comp change. And then I had a whole tier of specific strategies. So specific strategies would be like calorie cycling, refeeds, time restricted eating, body part specialization phases, training splits, whatever you want to lump in here, certain diet styles. These fall under specific strategies, and they're hot. Like, again, they can make the first tiers more likely to happen. Again, we could do calorie cycling. Maybe for you, that fits really well for you, and that allows you to stick to your training and nutrition. But calorie cycling in itself isn't going to drive body comp change. Like, you need to still have those other things in place, right? Same thing with refeeds. These are great. These are awesome. I love to use them. But if we're overly focused on refeeds, but our training needs work, nutrition isn't the greatest, then we need to work on that first before we worry about these. Again, I love this stuff. I love the specific strategies. I think they're super, super helpful and super fun to geek out on. But we just have to understand where they fall on this priority list here. One other thing too that I didn't mention is we have the first tier of training and movements, right? And how important I guess you could just lump it under exercise, how important that is. But these tiers higher up, the nutrition, the lifestyle stuff, the fine tuning, these are going to be things that can impact how much training you can do, how effective your training can be, and how intense you can push your training as well too. Again, if we are getting all these things dialed in, then that's going to create the space for you to be able to have pretty intense training to be able to do more. And that is ultimately going to drive more body composition change. We don't want to overlook how getting these in place can increase that. Where a lot of people get themselves into trouble is they exercise, they do move, they do train hard, but then all these other things like nutrition's off a little bit. There's maybe some things that they're not focused on from a nutrition perspective. Sleep and circadian health aren't great. Stress management, stress load on the body's high. And that limits the capacity at which they can train. So for them, they'd be better off focusing on, like, they already have those tiers in place. The first one, now if they can dial in these other ones, that increases their recovery capacity. So now they can do more training, hard training, and recover from it and see that change that they want to see. And you can have more effective and efficient body comp change. So again, it's not like these things that the last ones I went over are not important. They are, but really the goal of this podcast was to get you guys to think about this. Okay, if I'm trying to change my body, am I doing the things that really will drive body comp change, or am I maybe focused on things that are a little less again, what do my carbohydrates need to be at? Okay, but then we look and you're getting 5,000 steps a day, you're lifting, we could optimize your training program, we can optimize your execution of that training program, and you're not doing any cardio. Like, we got a lot of room that we can work on there before we overly stress about your carbohydrate intake. We can still work on your carbohydrate intake, but let's just understand what are the big rocks. And then again, if you also have a period of time where you have to really figure out what is the most important, what are my kind of minimums that I want to hit, then this should help you out with that as well too. So I hope this episode was helpful. Let me know if you guys have any questions on it. You can just reach out to me on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. If you haven't followed me there yet, make sure you do. And then lastly, if you found this podcast be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find it. That's it for this episode. Chat with you guys next time.